Councilman, thanks for having a cup of coffee with us this morning.
Definitely.
Initially, first question, what made you say, I want to be the next mayor of Kansas City?
Well, I'll tell you, we have, I've been on the council for 8 years. We have so much momentum in a lot of parts of the city. I've sat on the Economic Development Committee and worked with neighborhoods throughout every part of the city, but we still have work to do. We have neighborhoods that haven't seen the momentum, and I've been focused the last few years on revitalization east of Troost. We need a mayor that can continue to focus on that and keep the momentum going in the city, but make sure that everybody's represented at the table.
Education, that the pre-K vote will also be on the ballot.
Right.
Where do you stand when it comes to, one, just pre-K education, and two, will you vote to support it?
Well, I think as a former school board member, all the candidates are supportive of pre-K as a concept, but the structure of this is what has created a lot of issues with the school districts. None of the school districts are supportive of it, and that's a problem. So if it passes, I will work with to make sure, because the next mayor will be a part of that, to make sure that the issues and concerns raised by the school superintendents and school boards are addressed.
But will you support it? Will you vote for it?
Personally, as a former school board member, I will, because there are some good things in it that will benefit children. It's just there's some structural issues with the administration that would still need to be worked out.
You represent South Kansas City. You know, I actually live near South Patrol.
Yeah.
When it comes to crime, everyone knows there's no silver bullet.
Right.
What would you hope to do to continue to reduce crime here in the city?
So we have to look at it as holistically. There's definitely a health component to it. It's a public health issue, crime, and we need to treat it that way. We have a wonderful health department that has taken on initiatives such as Aim for Peace, and we need to continue those. We added social workers in police stations last year, first time ever, and the idea was to match existing services in the community with those that are at risk for being a crime victim, or those that are at risk for getting into committing a crime before that happens. And so I think that's working very well. We need to continue that. But we also need a shorter term solution on it. And I advocated in the last budget for more community policing, which means we have to have more officers in the budget so they have time to actually spend time with the community instead of going from crime to crime to crime. We added 23 officers. They're being hired now. We need to add probably a few more. We also need to continue with things such as increasing the reward money. That was just a few years ago at $2,000, which didn't catch a lot of people's attention. We increased the police chief, give him a lot of credit, worked with the corporate community, increased it to 5 and 10,000. There are some cities that have it much higher, and they get more tips when a crime's committed. We want to get those that are committing violent crimes off the streets as quickly as possible so they don't recommit.
Do you think, you've been on council for a while, why is Kansas City's police department the only one in the country now that is still not holistically, locally run? Do you think that needs to change? Are you hoping that Governor Parson changes that?
So that you're correct. We're the only one, just historic. There's a whole history to it dating back to Pendergast. We had a discussion about this about 8 years when I came on the council, and there was, the mayor, Mayor James at the time, set up a committee to have community leaders look at it. They actually came back and said at that time they did not recommend moving towards local control, because we've seen in St. Louis, while it sounded like a good idea, it's not working out very well. There are a lot of issues that have come up as a result of moving too quickly to it. So I'm open to the discussion, but I'm more focused on actually reducing crime and providing those social services that we need in the community.
Let's transition to infrastructure.
Sure.
Just because of the climate, it's winter, salt.
Yes.
A lot of people talk about, clearing the roads, but potholes have been a huge issue that is kind of a unifying thing against the city indirectly. What do you think Do you think the city's doing enough to make sure the common everyday things like potholes, not popping people's tires, where does that stand in your list of priorities?
So it's very high. Infrastructure is very important. That's why I supported this infrastructure bond. The first time we put together a package in the city, $800 million, just a couple of years ago, the voters supported it overwhelmingly. That came about because of concerns about infrastructure. We needed to fix our sidewalks, streets, the flooding issues we're having. We've got about $500 million going into that. A lot of federal money coming in because we passed that. But on the streets, we've got to accelerate that investment because we've had decades of underinvestment. You know, councils before, just for budget reasons or whatever, the money wasn't there. They didn't invest it. We are investing more in this budget than in a long time. I think 17 million for streets. That's up from about 12 and even less than that a few years ago. But I proposed an idea where we could come up with, we need to be at about $36 million a year to get back on track. There's a fund, a public improvement fund that we all council members have for neighborhood projects, streets, sidewalks. If we all got on the same page August 1st with the new council and said, the next cycle and into the next year, we're going to do street projects only or mostly street projects, we could come up with another 24 million on top of the 17 million and really make a dent in some of these long-term issues in the city. The potholes are a unique issue this year because of we've had more winter storms than I can ever remember, quite frankly. I don't expect that to be the case every year, but we even, with the thousands of potholes, what at least some of us on the council did is push the city manager to come up with something different because the issue we were having was the temperature. When it's too cold, the traditional way of doing potholes, it doesn't stay because there's a certain temperature requirement. It has to be warm enough. And we weren't getting it wasn't getting warm enough. So we've got a new technology. I think it costs an extra $200,000. It was kind of an emergency allocation, but this seems to be working in the coldest of temperatures. If it works, we need to make sure it's permanently part of our repair program.
Where do you stand on incentives? Some people believe that they have a time and a place to help spur other development, and some people feel that it hurts things like local school districts and other things. Your district is in a unique area where incentives were provided for Cerner and things like that. What is your take on, if you are the next mayor, how will you handle incentives?
So that's a good question. We have used the tools a lot more targeted than in the past. So Cerner is a good example. We had a vacant mall that was not coming back, not creating any tax revenue. We now have 16,000 new jobs going in there, and the personal property tax dollars all go back to the taxing jurisdictions. The e-tax, all these things, when you have people working, we have a record number of e-tax payments coming in to the city, which allows us to use that money for all neighborhoods. We need to continue the growth, that's number one, but since I've been chair of the Economic Development Committee the last 3 or 4 years, we've done very few new TIFs. The TIFs we have done have been on the east side. They've been Linwood and Prospect Shopping Center, the new grocery store, 27th to 47th and Troost. We've recaptured some of the earnings tax and redirected it into neighborhood redevelopment. And then we had an old vacant strip mall in the Northland. That project did not move forward even though it was passed, so it's not a live project. So only a handful of new projects like that using those tools. There are fewer incentivized projects in the last few years. We're seeing more of the smaller developments that don't necessarily ask for that because there's not a gap in financing. So I think we need to be targeted. That's why I focused on the East Side Revitalization Plan the last 2 years. Spent a lot of time in meetings with neighborhood leaders in the 3rd, 5th, and 6th District, Prospect Business Association, Urban League, Urban Summit, and we put together a great neighborhood package. And that's where I think the next mayor really needs to focus more on providing those tools east of Troost. We've got some good things happening, but there's not the same connectivity. And so that's why I've really focused on that. And I think if the next mayor signals that's where an area of interest and focus is, just think if we took the same emphasis we placed on downtown 20 years ago and put that east of Troost, how that would be in just a few years. Pretty significant change.
30 seconds or less, lastly, why should people vote for you in the primary on April 2nd?
So there are a lot of choices. I'm first on the ballot, so it could save everybody time if they just push that. But I have served on the school board for 4 years. That's unique to all the candidates. Center School Board, we helped turn around the school district, increase teachers' pay, increase test scores. That's important for the 15 school districts to have that experience, to work with them effectively. 8 years on the council, working with neighborhoods by virtue of being on the Economic Development Committee. We have to each week bring in people to a potential project where there might be issues. We need to resolve those issues with the neighborhood, bring people together. And so that's going to be important to have that collaborative style for the next mayor with all the challenges we face. I think that experience, and then the private sector experience I have as an attorney, we haven't talked about that, but I've worked with manufacturing companies that make products in the U.S. and export, walked a lot of lines, understand how companies work, and that's why we've been so effective in bringing thousands of new jobs to South Kansas City, literally hundreds of millions, billions of dollars on investment if you include Cerner. And I think we need to continue that growth so that all neighborhoods benefit from it.
Councilman, thanks so much for spending some time with us this morning.
Thank you. Appreciate it.